At the distant edge of the Orion Arm, where star clusters drift in quiet isolation, the Sarn Collective observed something unexpected, brief but powerful bursts of energy coming from a pale blue planet, orbiting an unremarkable star. Their deep space sensors, tuned for anomalies, picked up signatures that didn't match any known natural event. At first, the readings were dismissed as glitches, but when they repeated over several rotations, the Sarn High Command took notice. They sent a cluster of advanced probes to investigate, each capable of scanning entire continents and returning high-level data within hours. But none came back. They vanished into silence. This was not normal. No known primitive species had the power or technology to block Sarn probes and Earth. Officially classified as pre-FTL-175, was barely acknowledged in the Collective's records. Yet now, it was showing signs of advanced energy manipulation and, more troubling, defensive resistance. The Sarn were not a species that waited for danger to grow. History had taught them that hesitation bred defeat. Their logic was clear. If Earth was hiding advanced weapons, if it had somehow leapfrogged centuries of development, it posed a risk not just to the region, but to the balance of the galaxy. High Chancellor Threx ordered a full invasion, not a scout raid, not a diplomatic contact, a preemptive elimination. Earth was marked as a red-class target, total destruction authorized. The invasion fleet, nearly 500 ships strong, began its slow journey toward Sol. Each vessel carried weapons enough to shatter moons and burn oceans, and the Sarn expected a fast, clean operation. They believed they were acting before Earth could rise. Meanwhile, on Earth, deep beneath the Arctic ice, Project Sentinel came online. It was not a panic button, it was a response system, built in silence and maintained in secret by those who remembered a time when Earth was not alone. Ancient protocols, long thought deactivated, activated again as warring pings echoed from the outer solar system. No one saw them in public, but in hidden control rooms beneath old military bases and beneath the oceans. Eyes opened, hands moved, and systems that had slept for decades came alive. Governments didn't issue alerts. Satellites didn't show warnings. On the surface, Earth was calm, but under it, Earth was watching. At the core of this silent reaction was a name rarely spoken aloud: Orion Watch. To most, it was only a ghost story whispered in dark defense circles, a code for something buried and forgotten. But now, with an alien fleet inbound, Earth needed them again. And so they answered the call. Across continents, seemingly ordinary individuals, retired engineers, analysts, pilots received encrypted signals, each one with the same phrase: initiate stage 1, Ghost Protocol. They knew what it meant. It meant Earth was being targeted. Again. What the world didn't know was that this planet had faced a war once before, long ago, against an enemy that had since vanished from all records. That war had changed Earth forever. The survivors had chosen silence. They buried their technology, locked away their knowledge, and waited for the stars to forget. But the stars didn't forget, and now the Sarn were coming. In command centers, hidden beneath mountain ranges and old city foundations, the Orion Watch reassembled. Commander Elias Grain, once thought dead, stepped into the Sentinel core chamber, his face calm as he reviewed the incoming fleet. His voice echoed across a room lit by old holographic projections and glowing tactical maps. "They don't know," he said quietly. "They think we're sleeping." Earth's outer surveillance network, disguised as deep space telescopes and derelict satellites, began tracking the Sarn formation. They moved in formation, predictable, structured, confident. But what the Sarn didn't see were the small pings bouncing off them from asteroids, from comets, even from Jupiter's rings. Earth was painting the battlefield. Every Sarn ship was being mapped, down to engine vibration and energy output. In under 2 hours, the full fleet's behavior patterns were logged and analyzed. No one on Earth's surface noticed anything different. Power grids ran smoothly. Communications stayed normal. But in the dark layers beneath, Earth was awakening, not in fear, in purpose. And as the fleet crept closer, as the Sarn prepared for easy victory, they had no idea that their arrival had triggered a defense network built not for one invasion, but for any. They had not attacked a helpless world. They had stepped into the sightline of a planet that had once been a battlefield. And while the Sarn believed their strength would ensure silence, they were wrong. Earth was silent because it chose to be. But that silence was about to end. The Sarn fleet reached Jupiter with confidence, their ships glittering like a steel storm, circling the gas giant in perfect formation. Over 400 warships, armed with the deadliest weapons the Sarn Collective had ever built, stretched across the orbit like a silent net, preparing to send Earth its first and final warning before commencing the elimination protocol. High above the swirling storms of Jupiter, commanders adjusted positions, linked their sensors, and prepared to initiate diplomatic transmission only for something to go terribly wrong. Without warning, without flash or sound, the lead scout, Group 20 ships sent forward to scan Earth's upper atmosphere, simply vanished. No alarms triggered, no explosions followed. One moment they were there, the next they were gone from every channel, from every sensor, as if they had never existed. The fleet paused, shaken for the first time, unsure if this was a technical failure or something far more dangerous. As command crews recalibrated scanners and recalled forward ships, faint pulses began appearing on the edges of their long range. Sensors, weak, strange signals. Then came a wave of silent activation. Earth's true face revealed. Massive energy signatures surged from behind the moon, deep within Earth's mantle, and inside what once looked like ordinary satellites. Moon shifted slightly as long dormant structures rose from its dark side, angular towers of dull black metal, glowing faint blue from hidden cores. On Earth, points beneath oceans, deserts, and remote mountains came to life, and in orbit, hundreds of cloaked weapon systems began to unshroud. The Sarn fleet scrambled to react, but the first volley had already fired. Without visible launch, trails or warning lights, gravity-fold torpedoes leapt from hidden stations, bent space itself, and reappeared inside Sarn ships, tearing them apart from within. In less than 4 minutes, nearly 1/3 of the fleet was annihilated. Entire. Wings blinked out of existence, torn by forces they could neither see nor counter. Ships twisted mid-space, their cores pulled into themselves as if caught by invisible hands. The surviving commanders, trained in thousands of battle simulations, were paralyzed. None of those simulations had prepared them for this. No shields held, no targeting systems locked. Earth's defenses didn't aim where Sarn ships were. They aimed where they would be. The Battlefield A is controlling the orbital grid, operated beyond normal speed, reacting faster than light-based systems could track. Their targeting was predictive, learning from enemy formations in real time and adjusting trajectories even before. Sarn ships changed direction. Every countermeasure the Sarn activated was already anticipated. Every maneuver was already trapped. The Sarn had come expecting primitive defenses, a chaotic world with scattered resistance. Instead, they had flown into a web woven with patience and unseen genius. Plasma fields surged near Mars, slicing through command vessels. Cloaked Terran ships emerged from Saturn's rings, deploying weapons the Sarn had no name for beams, that phased through matter and scrambled their internal systems. From beneath Antarctica, a single pulse was launched into orbit, and 6 Sarn dreadnoughts collapsed under a wave of electromagnetic silence, their systems fried in a moment of total data erasure. Earth was not reacting, it was executing. Sentinel, Command had gone fully active, and the Orion Watch had taken control of the battlefield. In a hidden command center beneath the Pacific, Commander Elias Grain stood over a holographic sphere, watching red markers vanish in batches. His officers spoke in calm bursts, relaying data, coordinating strikes. There was no shouting, no panic. Earth wasn't surprised by this war. It had been preparing for it longer than the Sarn had existed. The silence of Earth's systems wasn't weakness. It was design. Above in orbit, the remaining Sarn ships formed emergency clusters, trying to create a defensive perimeter, but it was already too late. Terran weapons weren't attacking their ships. They were unraveling their strategy. Every formation fell into traps they couldn't see. Every escape route closed seconds before they reached it. One commander tried to self-destruct his ship. To prevent its capture, the ship never responded. Earth had already overridden its controls. That's when panic truly began. Broadcasts from the fleet turned chaotic requests for retreat, for surrender, for understanding. But Earth sent no response. It didn't need to. The only sound heard on Sarncons was a single repeating signal, no voice, just a low frequency. Pulse encoded with a human phrase. Warning. Engagement confirmed. Exit corridor closed. The message was clear. Earth was not negotiating. It was defending. And it was doing so with terrifying calm. High above, in the void beyond Neptune, a second wave of Earth's stealth ships waited in reserve, fully armed yet untouched. Earth wasn't even using all its strength. The Sarn fleet, once the pride of a galactic empire, was being wiped out, not in rage, but with clinical precision. Not a single Terran ship had fallen. Not a single Terran operator had raised their voice. As the last hour of battle passed, and the remains of the Sarn fleet scattered toward the dark edges of the solar system, one truth became undeniable to every living soldier who survived. They had not attacked a weak world. They had awakened a predator that had simply been resting, and now it had opened its eyes. Above the shattered edge of the solar system, what remained of the Sarn fleet drifted in chaos, scarred and confused, struggling to regroup after suffering. A defeat unlike anything in their empire's long history. Their commanders, once proud and decisive, were now desperate, sending scrambled messages back to the collective and demanding answers from ships that no longer existed. As emergency, scans of Earth's orbital defenses poured in. One fact became terrifyingly clear: Earth had no visible command center. There was no central hub, no single station or ship guiding the assault. Instead, the entire defensive system was fractured across hundreds, maybe thousands of stealth satellites, orbital drones, deep Earth bunkers, and lunar platforms, all connected through a secure and invisible data web that even the Sarn couldn't trace. It wasn't just advanced, it was ancient, layered in a way that suggested upgrades built over decades or even centuries. The deeper their analysts dug, the stranger the discoveries became. Hidden among the attack patterns and response data were traces of technologies that didn't align with current galactic science. There were field generators that bent space around impacts, weapons that fired massless projectiles at near-infinite speed, and drones that used gravitational anchors to hover in direct opposition to known physics. The Sarn began to realize they weren't fighting an advanced species. They were fighting one that had surpassed the frontier of known science long ago. And more unsettling, none of it was new. The systems they faced had signs of long-term maintenance, wear, and even partial decay in some areas. These were not first-use weapons. They had history. Somewhere on Earth, deep beneath the ice, in forgotten bunkers and locked facilities, hidden in mountains or under seas, the people of Earth had prepared for something like this, long before the Sarn had ever marked them. Inside the main control chamber of Project Sentinel, Commander Elias Grain stood quietly before a wide display screen showing the entire solar system. with markers tracking every Sarn ship and orbital weapon in motion. He said nothing as the screen updated, shifting enemy ships from red to gray as more were disabled or driven back. Around him, officers of the Orion Watch worked in coordinated silence engineers, pilots, cryptographers, all veterans of something far greater than any surface government had ever admitted. One of the younger analysts, barely old enough to remember why Orion Watch had gone dark decades ago, turned to Elias and asked the question many were afraid to speak aloud. Why is all of this here? Why didn't we use it before? Elias looked at the screen, then at the ceiling, as if remembering something long buried. Because we already fought a war once, he said, and we decided no one should know. The truth, kept hidden for over a century, was that Earth had not always been isolated. Long ago, during an age when space travel was still new to humans, Earth had been pulled into a silent conflict far beyond the stars, a war not between planets, but between civilizations that had already mastered time, matter, and energy. Earth had been a pawn in that war, caught between two ancient empires that saw humanity as a resource to be used or erased. But Earth hadn't been helpless then. It had risen, learned quickly, and surprised everyone, enemies and allies alike. For a brief time, Earth had burned bright in the galactic dark, and then, without warning, had vanished. No one in the galaxy remembered what had happened. No records existed. Systems that once showed Earth's name had been edited or erased. But it had not been forgotten by the ones who had survived. After the war, the leaders of Earth had made a choice. They had walked away quietly, choosing isolation over escalation. They erased the files. They buried the weapons. And they formed Orion Watch, not to expand, not to conquer, but to wait, in case the stars ever remembered them. And now they had. Across the Sarn fleet, fear began to spread. Their historians started recovering fragments of old classified data, myths of a Terran event buried in forgotten code, images of vanished worlds, ships torn apart by forces they couldn't understand, and reports of a species that had refused to kneel. Earth had been at the center of something big, something buried so deep that only the oldest of artificial minds remembered it. The Sarn had awakened not a new enemy, but an old ghost. Earth wasn't defending itself for the first time. It was returning to a role it had once played long ago. And the worst part for the Sarn wasn't the weapons or the strategy. It was that humanity had waited in silence, had chosen peace, and had only raised its hand now because someone else had made the first move. That kind of patience terrified them. In the dark corners of the galaxy, a saying began to rise again. One whispered in fear, not anger. Beware the quiet planet. It remembers. In a final act of desperation, with their fleet shattered and command in disarray, the Sarn High Command chose a path they had once sworn never to take. They authorized the launch of the Sun Spear, a doomsday-class weapon designed not to destroy planets outright, but to destabilize their gravitational balance, shifting orbits, cracking tectonic plates, and rendering entire biospheres unlivable without ever dropping a single bomb. The missile, massive and cloaked in layered energy shielding, exited from a hidden Sarn cruiser positioned behind Neptune's shadow, its course locked straight for Earth. In Sarn doctrine, the Sun Spear was not meant for battle. It was a warning, so terrifying that most civilizations surrendered before it was fired. But Earth did not surrender. As the Sun Spear silently crossed Saturn's rings, Earth's response didn't come from a cannon, a fleet, or a manned defense station. Instead, Project Sentinel executed Arc-Lance Protocol, a mathematical countermeasure encoded into Earth's strategic AI network generations ago. Unlike traditional weapons, the Arc-Lance didn't fire a missile or beam. It created a localized shift in quantum trajectory, a pocket of redefined physics that altered the path of the Sun Spear without touching it. One moment the missile moved forward, and the next it was gone, not destroyed, but folded. Its root collapsed into a space-time knot that led nowhere. From the Sarn's view, the weapon simply vanished before reaching Mars. The fleet, already fraying under the strain of confusion and fear, fell into complete silence. No retaliation came from Earth. No taunting message followed. Instead, sensors across the remnants of the Sarn armada began lighting up with new contacts. One by one, ships detected signatures of vessels emerging from the edges of the solar system block. Sleek forms with no readable propulsion systems and no visible weapons. Yet each one broadcasting a quiet, encrypted pulse. They didn't decloak. They simply appeared. Dozens at first. Then hundreds. These were Terran ships' ghost vessels, silent as the void, arriving not from Earth, but from deep interstellar space, places even the Sarn hadn't mapped. Their formation was perfect. Their positions surrounded the fleet with surgical precision. Every Sarn escape route, every potential jump vector was already blocked. It was not an attack. It was containment. The message was clear. Earth had not just defended itself, it had been tracking the Sarn from the start. While the invaders believed they were striking first, Earth had already marked their fleet, mapped their movements, and prepared its counterstrike well in advance. These weren't newly built ships. They were part of an older force, one kept far from Earth's skies, hidden in the shadows, waiting for a day like this. Some bore the markings of the old war, their hulls engraved with forgotten battles, long faded from galactic memory. The Sarn fleet, broken and cornered, moved nothing. They didn't speak. They didn't raise shields. What could they say? Every tactic, every fallback, every hidden weapon they had tried was already calculated and neutralized. And still, Earth didn't fire. The Terran ships remained still, engines quiet, systems running cold, as if waiting for permission from some unseen commander. On Earth, inside a control center buried beneath the Andes, Commander Elias Grain watched the last of the Sarn fleet appear, in the display feed motionless, exposed, helpless. Around him, members of Orion Watch remained silent, hands poised, but inactive. No order was given to eliminate them. There was no need. They weren't a threat anymore. What had once been called protocol-level defense was only the surface of Earth's power. Everything the Sarn had seen so far, every weapon, every defense system was automated response, prepared decades ago, never updated because it had never needed to be. Earth had spent generations hiding its true strength, not behind walls, but behind the belief that it was weak. And the galaxy had believed it. That was the greatest defense of all. In the void between planets, the Sarn finally understood the full truth. Earth had never been vulnerable. It had never been backward. It had never forgotten the stars. It had simply waited for the moment when someone would be foolish enough to knock, thinking no one was home. And now that someone had only to find the house was a fortress, and its keepers were not just awake, they were ready. In the silence of space, among the cold wreckage and glowing lights, a new fear began to bloom across the stars, spreading from system to system like a ripple in water. Not fear of a conquering empire, not fear of a cruel enemy, but fear of a power that moved with discipline, patience, and a calm no one could match. Earth didn't need to shout. It didn't need to strike. It only needed to be seen. And now that it had, the galaxy would never look at it the same way again. The moment the last Terran ship finished phasing into position, surrounding the scattered remains of the Sarn fleet, silence gripped the entire battlefield. There were no more weapons firing, no systems scrambling for cover, no voices crying over command channels. The Sarn commanders simply stared at their displays, watching the black Terran vessels hold formation like sentinels at the edge of a graveyard, unmoving, silent, perfect. There was no doubt anymore. They were outmatched, outflanked, and utterly exposed. Their most advanced weapons had failed before even being fired, their strategies dismantled before being tested. And now, with no options left, they waited for the final blow, expecting annihilation. But it didn't come. Instead, after several minutes of absolute stillness, a single transmission lit up across every surviving Sarn ship, clean and undistorted, delivered in flawless Sarn dialect, along with 27 other major galactic languages. The voice was human firm, calm, unshaken. "This is your only warning. Do not return." That was all. No threats, no demands, no boasting. Just a line of quiet certainty that cut deeper than any weapon. In that moment, the Sarn realized Earth was not like the other species they had fought. It didn't gloat. It didn't beg. It didn't pretend. It had drawn a line and dared anyone to cross it again. The Sarn, humiliated and shaken to their core, gave the order to withdraw. What was left of their fleet turned slowly, engines stuttering, slipping into hyperspace one by one, limping back toward their territory with shattered pride and countless questions. They had come to crush a backwater planet and left with the haunting knowledge that they had nearly awoken something far worse than they'd imagined. And across the galaxy, the story spread like wildfire. Within hours, trading hubs, frontier stations, and even quiet diplomatic satellites were flooded with the same message. The Terrans were awake. Not as an empire, not as invaders, but as something far older defenders who waited in the dark with weapons that had no equal, and with a silence that spoke louder than war. Old records were reopened. Dusty archives once labeled myths or exaggerated human folklore were suddenly studied again with new eyes. Every major power, whether ruling over sectors or barely holding their borders, took note. It wasn't the strength of Earth's weapons that terrified them. It was the way they used them. No overkill. No destruction of retreating enemies. No push for territory or conquest. Earth didn't seek war. It prevented it, precisely, cleanly, without emotion. And then, once the job was done, it simply stepped back. On Earth, the public never fully knew the scale of what had happened. A few whispers leaked into classified corners of the internet. A few lights danced in the night sky for brief seconds. And some distant telescopes caught readings that didn't make sense. But by and large, humanity went on. Children went to school. Cities pulsed with life. Nations turned their eyes to economics and weather forecasts and entertainment, blissfully unaware that, just beyond the stars, their planet's name now carried a weight it hadn't held in 100 years. Project Sentinel shut down its active phase and returned to deep watch status. The black ships slowly disappeared back into the void, scattering into the darkness from where they came. The Arc Lance's targeting array powered down. A quantum grids across the moon, and the old Antarctic vaults fell quiet again. Earth's defenses didn't need to stay loud. They just needed to remain ready. Orion Watch, once again invisible, returned to the silence it preferred, its members fading into ordinary roles: engineers, scientists, quiet observers. Their mission wasn't glory. It was memory. And now the stars would remember. In far-off empires, council meetings turned. Quiet when Earth was mentioned. Generals reran invasion simulations and found themselves removing humanity as a target entirely. Merchant guilds revised star charts, adding Earth not as a trade route, but as a caution zone. And in whispered circles of fleet commanders and security officers, a new protocol was passed without discussion. Never attack the humans first, because now they knew. The humans had never been asleep. They had never been blind. They had simply chosen peace. But beneath that peace was preparation layers of it, stretching through decades of silence watched over by minds who had seen too much and swore to ensure it never happened again. Earth's greatest power was not its technology or its ships. It was its restraint, the kind of restraint that only came from surviving something terrible and learning that true strength is shown not by destruction, but by choosing when not to use it. The galaxy had expected a primitive world ripe for conquest. What they found was the gate to a sleeping fortress, older than their empires, sharper than their blades, and quieter than their darkest fears. Earth didn't need to rise. It had already arrived. And now it waited again, not in fear, not in pride, but with eyes open and defenses sleeping just beneath the surface. The stars would never forget this lesson, and they would never, ever make the mistake of waking Earth a second time.